All right, well, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Happy New Year. Good riddance, 2020. Welcome 2021, although I don't know if it's gotten off to a better start, but fingers crossed, head high, right? My name is Jesus Azanza. I'm the Executive Director for the Greater Houston Chapter of CAI. And we've got a great presentation for you today. I think you'll be more than pleased and impressed with the level of experience and knowledge of our presenters. Our sponsor today is Superior Lawn Care. They'll get on the line here in just a minute to say a few words. But before we do that, a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar has been approved for 1 hour of continuing education credit. It's being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and everyone will receive a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. So after today, or possibly tomorrow morning, be on the lookout for an email with the certificate of completion, the link to the video, and a PDF copy of the presentation. Before we get into the introductions, I want to just give a quick update on some ways you can get involved, excuse me, sponsor, and some upcoming events. On Friday, January 22nd, we have our manager chat. That's hosted by Dee Eaton. She is on our board of directors. So thank you, Dee, for putting together a great agenda. That's a great platform for managers, community board members to exchange ideas, share knowledge, vent, whatever it is. So please be sure to register online for that. After, we have our HOA Power All Things Electric webinar / annual meeting on February 3rd. The front end of that, we have about 10 minutes presentation on the state of the chapter. You'll hear from our chapter president, and we'll introduce our board members. So that's a free event. That's actually backed by popular demand. We did that last year. So now we're doing it virtually, and it's a great presentation with some updates on energy solutions for communities. After that, I'm really excited about this one. February 17th, we are throwing axes in Pearland, and it's actually a lot safer than it sounds. If you've done it before, you know how fun it is. If you haven't, I invite you to participate. Free for managers, free for homeowners, board leaders, $50 if you're a business partner vendor. If you're a premium partner on this call, hopefully you receive the email, and depending on your level of commitment, you get a certain number of tickets. So CAIHouston.org, go online, register for all of this stuff, and let me know if you have any questions or looking to sponsor. Okay, so today's sponsor is Superior Lawn Care. Michael is going to say a few words about his company and solutions he can provide for your community. Michael is on our board of directors. They are a bronze premium partner, and he's been really instrumental in our chapter's progress over the last year and a half. So we thank him for his leadership. And Michael, I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar today. I know it's a little chilly and it was hard for us all to get here, but we're here. My name is Michael Barrera with Superior Lawn Care. We're a full commercial maintenance contracting company. So if you have any projects in mind, please feel free to give me a call. I think our information will be in the chat, and I will follow up with an email for my contact information. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of this webinar.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate that. So let me get into some introductions. Paul Overton is Executive Vice President and partner with Empire Works, a leader in building reconstruction and painting services. He currently oversees the Florida, Arizona, and Texas markets with a focus in the division management / expert services for pre-litigation and post-litigation reconstruction for existing homeowner association multifamily complexes. Paul has extensive experience in project management and estimating and is a graduate of Louisiana State University. Go Tigers, right? Monica Uribe is an attorney with Crane Storts. Monica joined Crane Storts in 2018, a leading construction defect law firm in Colorado, Minnesota, and Texas, representing property owners and community associations. Monica graduated from Baylor University with a degree in music performance and a minor in political science. After Baylor, she attended the Chicago-Kent College of Law, where she earned a certificate in international and comparative law. Monica is a proud member of the Dallas Bar Association, Dallas Association of Young Lawyers, and the Dallas Hispanic Bar Association. Outside of the office, Monica enjoys live music, cycling, dogs, tennis, and of course, rooting for her alma mater, the Baylor Bears. Thank you.
Bears.
I'm going to really appreciate your time on Unshare, and I'll hand it over to our presenters.
Excellent.
There it goes.
Very good. Very good.
Good morning, everybody. It looks like we have a pretty good turnout. I think we've got over 40 people here in this particular webinar, so thank you guys for attending. Today we're going to be talking to you, Paul and I are going to be talking to you guys about construction defects, how to avoid them, when to pursue them, and if you are unfortunately in one, how to go through that process as painlessly as possible. So first and foremost, what is a construction defect? And I know Paul and I will be talking about what's a defect versus what is normal maintenance, wear and tear. But when we're talking about construction defect, what we're really talking about are things that are specifically related to deficiencies in the design, the supervision of the original construction or repair, inspections, whether an inspector missed something or the builder missed something when they were building their original construction, the construction itself, and there's also such a thing as a negligent repair, where maybe you guys have an older building, let's say, and you recently got entirely new roofs, and it's the new roofs that are leaking. Although your building may be 50 years old, your roof may be 3 years old. And if the roof is what's having problems, you wouldn't necessarily be timed out because the building is so old. You actually can recover for your association if the repair itself is negligent, because that timing starts on its own. But we'll definitely talk about timing as well. And construction defects happen when there are failures by a builder or a construction professional who don't follow the plans. They don't follow the building codes. They don't follow the manufacturer's installation instructions, the standards that the industry recognizes, whether it's for roofing or siding or building in general. And their construction did not perform, and it didn't happen in a good and workmanlike manner, which is a legal buzzword that really encompasses all the other things I just discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to add some color to that, Monica. In terms of when they build these, a lot of the defects aren't noticeable by the normal layperson. A lot of times it's the little details that they don't put in right. You can look at flashing details. Generally speaking, the builders don't pay the subcontractors a lot of money to build these. There's very thin margins, and the subcontractors, obviously, they want to make money. So, it's very, it's almost profitable to take shortcuts. And the shortcuts are the little details. Generally speaking, they can put the siding on right. They can put the stucco on most of the time right. They can lay the roof shingles. But it's all the flashing details at the roof to wall, at the transitions, different substrates. And a lot of times you can't see them. And we'll get into more in the presentation, and you'll see some of the damages caused by not installing the little details correctly.
Absolutely. And there are definitely some repeat offenders or hot spots in construction, places where things can go wrong. There are definitely some repeat offenders. Typically, especially in the Texas market, you're going to see, and in Houston, because you guys have your own unique climate, you've got your own, flooding issues. So you guys are just much more humid than we are here in Dallas. I'm actually located in Irving right now. And so things that you guys will see, and often in your market specifically, you're going to see lots of water intrusion, whether it comes in through roofs, windows, doors. It can come in anywhere. You guys will likely see also issues with flat work or your concrete, foundation issues, especially with some of our soils that we have here in Texas. Poor drainage, which kind of goes with flooding. A lot of issues with firewalls. That seems to be something that is really hidden. You're not really going to see until it's too late. And that's something that you don't want to have to deal with, the too late part of things, because that can get really complicated with insurance, which we'll discuss later as well. And something that I'm noticing more and more is that there seems to be a trend with improper attic ventilation that can also cause damage to the shingles that are on the outside of the home. And when you have that kind of issue, it can really cause problems with the shingles themselves, overheating them, causing them to deteriorate faster than you would expect, so that when you have a next hail event, your shingles aren't what they should be. And suddenly everyone's surprised that the hail damage is as significant as it is because of this improper attic ventilation that may be underlying.
Absolutely. And improper firewalls is becoming a big issue. I think in Texas, people are paying more attention to them. But in other markets, there was recently a law seminar, and one of the fastest, I guess, trends in the defect is looking at these firewalls. And in terms of importance, it's a life safety issue. Okay, so those firewalls are designed, if there's a unit and there's a fire, that it doesn't get to the other unit, and it gives them a certain amount of time to get out. So when they install those wrong, there's all kinds of issues. There's aluminum clips. They put wood blocking between the trusses and the firewalls. They're not fire rated. And, you know, a lot of times we need to show damages. If there's a defect, we need to be able to prove damages, but really the damages in those situations is, you know, somebody could die. The building department could red tag the buildings. So these are really important issues. And there's a few other ones, like in terms of stucco, almost 99% of the time they don't put it on thick enough. You know, they're usually an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch from meeting code. The lath that they put on, the first coat of stucco is not embedded into it. And these are all things you can't see. Windows, the windows have to be flashed in a particular way. They have to integrate into the building envelope. Again, it's something you can't see when the exterior cladding's on. Depending on what type of exterior cladding they put on, hardy is a big product used here in Texas. And there's certain specs they have to follow produced by the hardy manufacturer. So we see the whole gamut, and you know, it's something to be on the watch for. Somebody just commented they don't do stucco install correctly, period. You're absolutely right. I've never seen a stucco job done right. Okay, let's talk a little bit about normal maintenance versus construction defect. I think everybody on this call is pretty in tune with the fact that, you know, you have to paint the exterior buildings, you have to clean the roofs, you have to power wash the buildings and the walkways. You may have to power wash the decks. You have to take care of the landscaping, gutter cleaning. But in terms of like defects, the painting's a little tricky, because I think a lot of people feel like, oh, there's some cracks in the stucco, but generally we can just caulk those and paint the buildings and we'll be done. And we'll get into some slides later on that are going to show that that's not necessarily always true. But when you start seeing things like delaminating stucco, you're having roof leaks, people are complaining about those. There's big stains underneath the decks that are running down the stucco or the exterior claddings, premature cracking of the asphalt and concrete. Those would be considered construction defects, and they're a little bit more serious in nature. Okay, we have two types of defects. We have patent defects, and those are the type of defects that we can walk around, do a visual ground level inspection, and we can note those, we can see them. You look at the picture on the left, there's clearly some cracked stucco there. It's starting to delaminate. The top right-hand picture, this is the result of after investigative testing, but you can see there's some stuff going on there. You know there's an issue. You look at the bottom right-hand picture, that would be an example of a latent defect. And those are the ones that are serious, right? Those are the ones that we can't always see. And we need to use tools of the trade, maybe infrared imaging. We need to do some investigative testing to properly understand what's going on behind the substrates.
Right, and I will say that when it comes to the patent defects and the latent defects, those are also kind of legal terms of art. Open and obvious is what you hear a lot, or concealed defects. And it's really the concealed defects that really get homeowners, property, whether it's an HOA or a single family homeowner, those are the ones that get people caught off guard, right? Those are things you literally cannot see from the outside, but they usually show themselves or manifest inside the house first when you start getting a leak here or there, an unusually large crack from frames of windows or doors, bubbling of paint, even if they don't normally see water. Those would be the manifestations of those hidden, concealed defects that you normally start seeing on the inside first. And it's when you open the outside that, there it is, there's the problem. But those are things that can really get you in trouble. And as a property manager, those hearing concerns about, I've got this issue or that issue that may be bubbling of paint, cracking of paint on the interiors, your guys' first suspicion or first instinct might be interior equals homeowner, not my problem. But you should also start thinking, if you start hearing multiple people saying they've got paint issues, mold, or what they suspect to be mold, they've got caulking that's coming off, chipping of paint, that's going to be an indicator that there might be something going on inside the walls of the home that's really an exterior problem that's manifesting on the inside. So don't just ignore it.
Yeah, it's a really good point. By the time you're seeing interior water intrusion, like staining of the drywall and bubbling paint, this picture on the bottom right, that's already going on inside your walls. The water's been working its way through the stucco or the exterior cladding. It's gotten into the framing and sheeting and insulation, potential for mold growth in there. And then you start seeing the interior water intrusion. So it's something to be on the lookout for. And your radar should go up, or your red flags, as soon as people start complaining about interior water intrusion. Here's an example of infrared imaging. And most times these types of pictures are not admissible in court, but it does help us understand what's going on behind the stucco or the exterior cladding. So generally speaking, infrared imaging tells the difference between hot and cold. And these pictures here, the sun was shining on the stucco. I was able to take these pictures, and it gave me a clear indication what's going on behind the stucco. If you look at the picture on the right, there's an engineered truss holding up that wall. And I can tell by this picture that the header above the window probably has some water intrusion, that the left side of the window clearly has some water intrusion. It looks like some water intrusion has gotten into the truss that holds up the wall. So we don't know the extent of the damage when we take these pictures, but it gives us a really good idea that there's probably an issue going on behind the cladding. Okay, so again, if you look at the picture at the bottom right, that is an elevation that's identical to the one where I took the picture at. So in this picture, what has happened, if you look at the top of the roof where it meets that block firewall, the flashing detail, the small little details were not installed right. Everything else, this stucco happened to meet code. They had parapet flashing on there. The roof was fine, but that flashing detail, they didn't install it right. So what happened is water trickled in underneath that flashing detail, and it worked its way down the wall. And by osmosis, it spread across the whole wall to the left. So you can see when we cut that, during investigative testing, we cut that, and the entire wall is moldy and severe water intrusion, and now we have dry rot. Generally speaking, when we get into investigative testing, the board has likely had an inspection. They've talked to an expert. They've looked at the issues. They've consulted with an attorney. And once the case is signed up on some sort of agreement with the attorney will schedule the investigative testing. They'll hire an engineer that's an expert. They'll hire a construction expert, and we'll go out and we'll make cuts. we call them, into the cladding. And we'll test brick cladding, we'll test siding, we'll remove portions of roofing. We will do some interior window testing, we'll put spray racks. We do a sampling, and this is limited testing. We don't cut all the buildings, but we cut enough to make sure that we have a complete understanding what's going on behind the stuccos and what kind of damages the defects are causing.
I will say investigative testing is always fascinating. In a case that we had in Houston specifically, we had this little half wall came about chest height, made of, or the exterior was stucco. It was on a patio, and the patio, this is the first floor. And it was so interesting because the wall itself looked fine. It looked sturdy. You would have no idea that anything was wrong underneath it. We actually hadn't even thought to test those walls at all. But there were some cracks on the top where you would probably put your hand or set a drink down that appeared to have been sealed at one point in time. So they thought, let's just open it up. That wall, the only thing that was keeping that wall up was the stucco. As soon as the stucco was taken off, the studs, the sheathing was all mulch. You could literally just grab it and just dissolve it in your hands. It just fell over, the whole thing. So the only thing keeping that thing up was stucco, and you would never have known it from looking at the exterior of the wall. So what happens on the inside of things and the latent or concealed defects that exist, they're very real. And you guys, as either, with whether it's your homeowners or you guys as property managers, should really keep your ears perked up, red flags, when you start hearing multiple complaints of the same kind of complaint that's happening on the inside. Even if it's, not the association's job to pay for the painting, at least it's something that you're aware of that's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a perfect example. This unit owner was complaining of some water intrusion through her window. So when we first got on site, we looked at the exterior elevation and it looked fine to me. Basically, the case got into litigation. We performed some investigative testing. The case ultimately settled, but when we took the stucco off, this is what we found. And there was 33 locations just like this. And I think the net settlement to make these repairs was around $1 million, but they would have never known they had an issue unless this homeowner complained. Everybody walked right by this repair every day. As you can see at the bottom of the right-hand picture, that's an engineered truss sitting on metal brackets that are on the right side. That's a block firewall, and then underneath the stone. So those are mounted on there, and that engineered truss is sitting on those, and it's holding up the entire wall above their garage door and their entryway. So, again, it's just an example of, if you're hearing about water intrusion, usually there's some significant damage between the outside and the inside before it gets there. Ultimately, this was our repair. We basically had to remove the entire elevation because there was nothing to save. We had to replace the engineered truss. We had to reframe the wall. Unfortunately, you can kind of see in the background, there's a blue tarp there. We had to frame a new wall on the interior of the house and tarp it off so that people could live there while we made repairs. But now, because we found this, and if we didn't find this repair, or this person would have complained, at some point the association would have not only these repairs, which totaled $1 million, but they would have been responsible for all the windows, the other stucco areas where they had water intrusion, all the coatings. And ultimately, this was a $2.6 million job that we were successful in getting money from the developer, so the board didn't have to special assess or get a loan.
So oftentimes, I know most Texans are litigation averse, or you hear the word litigation or lawsuit, and that is the last thing on earth you'd want to do. And to be quite frank, most times people don't necessarily like lawyers until they need one. And, when do you need one, right? That's a really good question. And so there's some, we've been talking to you guys about being proactive, and that's the name of the game. Be proactive as property managers. You guys are definitely the eye in the sky. You have the best vantage point to know what is going on in the community, because as you all know, people don't really talk to their neighbors anymore. So it's not like these neighbors are talking to each other to know, are you having this leak? Are you having this issue? And if it is, it might be just, immediately next to them. But if you've got a community of 150, they're not going to know enough to know. Their board members may not know enough to know, but you guys are definitely in that position. So if you think that there are some things that, I wonder, maybe I'm having some issues, but I don't want to sue someone. I will say Texas law requires you to actually not sue somebody immediately, but to try to take some steps. Now, I will say there are some exceptions, because sometimes time is not on your side. And if you absolutely have to protect your right to sue, because there is a certain clock, and if you are 1 day late, you are SOL. No claim for you. Get ready for a special assessment. But that would be an exception. But I will say that there are things that you can do before litigation. And if you were to get involved with an attorney, they would discuss certain things with you to do beforehand. Like, first and foremost, let's conduct a site walk with an expert. If you guys have ever been involved in construction defect litigation, you might be a little sensitive to it. And maybe, you just rather have a second opinion on everything, and that's okay too. If you think that there might be some issues that you don't necessarily have the expertise on, but you want someone else's expert advice, contact an attorney, contact some kind of vendor like Empire Works or someone who does reconstruction to do a site walk. Most of us will do it for free because you just never know. You'd rather be on the safe side than be wrong. That's for sure. Conduct a site walk with an expert, get an opinion. Sometimes there's not a there. Sometimes it really truly is just a maintenance issue. But you never know. You can also look at your reserve studies. If you've taken over a community, or if you're new at transition, you should have a reserve study somewhere in the file. Although I understand that when a new company takes over, you get what you get, and you may not. But if you do have a reserve study, you may want to take a look at it to see where were we projected to be right now. And if, let's say, for example, the roof still has another good 25 years of life, but I'm starting to see roof leaks. We're starting to pay out an unusual amount in roof repairs. My reserve study says I shouldn't be there. Maybe it's a bigger issue than I'm thinking. Texas law requires you to actually put notice or give notice to the builder or developer that you may be bringing a claim against. And most declarations require the same as well. You have to at least let them know if you think that you're going to have to get to that kind of steps, that you've got to let the builder know, hey, we've got roof leaks. I want you to know that we're aware that we've got some roof leaks and there may be some construction defects in the roof or the windows or whatever the case may be. And Texas law does require that when you do put the builder on notice, that you also have to let the builder have an opportunity to make a repair offer or even provide money. Maybe they don't want to do the work anymore. Maybe they don't do the work anymore, but here's some money for the association to make those repairs. So there are things to do before litigation without filing litigation that I know can put some people at ease, that there is a chance to try to work it out with the builder. And some builders will come through and will make the repairs or will provide money. I will say more likely than not, they will not do that, but at least you're trying. And the association is always the one wearing the white hat in this scenario, because you guys are the one that are wronged. You guys are the ones that are living in a community that's not what you paid for. You paid for a home that was built and constructed correctly. You're trying your best to work things out with the builder, and that's as much as you can ask for before you have to get to that ultimate last step.
Yeah, absolutely. That's well put, Monica. So I think the main takeaway is here, there's a process for the builder to come fix the stuff. And it's really, before litigation, he has the opportunity to come in there and make it right. And, Monica said that usually they don't. And that's kind of a bad sign, because they understand there's defects and they just want to walk away from it. And but anyways, he has a chance to rectify it before there's litigation. And I think it's worth mentioning, there's an opportunity at certain stages to really walk with an expert and do a site walk. I think one place would be if it's newly transitioned to the new board of directors. If the builders built the community out and they controlled the board, and now it's transitioning to a new board, that's a great time to do a site inspection. And remember, Monica mentioned the statute of repose and the statute of limitations. After it's transitioned, or the last CO date, actually, you have 2 years if you knew of or should have known of defects. So certainly probably before the 2-year mark. And then ultimately you have the statute of repose, which is 10 years. So if you have communities that are 10, 2, or just transition, that's a really good time to have a site walk. And, for us, we do them for free because we want to help the boards. So it doesn't cost anything.
And I know sometimes people will say, well, what are my options? Truly, you have 3 options. You could do nothing if you think that there are enough issues that have arisen where you think that there might be construction defects. Maybe you've done a site walk, someone's told you, okay, these are the kinds of things that we see out here. These are some of the issues that we have noticed from the exterior. You could do nothing, but that's really not advisable, because it's only going to get worse, and you're going to have to pay for it anyway. You could say, that's fine, we're not going to pursue the builder, we're going to do it ourselves, but depending on your community, that means you may have to raise dues or specially assess the homeowners for repairs. Or, you could take that extra step and try to hold the builder developer responsible, get them to make the repairs or get them to pay for the repairs. That's really the ultimate outcome that an association could get, where the builder's who's making them whole for really their own shortcomings.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think anybody prefers litigation. As Monica mentioned, the buildings don't get better, they get worse. The stuff you can't see in the framing and sheeting, they get worse. There's no situation where it's appealing to raise dues or get a loan to make repairs because you missed the statute. So the silver lining is, yep, it takes a couple years, it's inconvenient to file litigation, but ultimately you're holding the person responsible for the damages and the defects at the end of the day. And it's not the homeowner. They saved up, made the biggest investment of their lives, and now they have mold and they have water intrusion. It shouldn't be their responsibility to correct these defects.
So when do you need to bring in an expert? If you've got your normal maintenance crew out there and they maybe have tried to caulk or find or source a leak once, twice, 3 times, and if they can't figure that out, then it's likely something that's not just on the surface of the building that may be just a normal ordinary maintenance issue. This may be something that's going on under the stucco, under your siding, your brick cladding, somewhere something is going wrong in a place you can't see it and likely has been there since original construction. We always talk about a rule of 3. If you start seeing the same problems at least 3 times, across a project, that may be an indication that the construction was defective everywhere, right? The same crews, the same plans, the same lack of construction done in a good and workmanlike manner, or following the industry code standards or the specs. It doesn't shock me when I see windows improperly flashed everywhere. And maybe not everyone's complaining of water, and they're just lucky because maybe they're facing a different way, right? Maybe they're facing to the west and it's the eastern exposure that gets the brunt of the rain, or the northern exposure. Maybe they are facing an alley and there's another building there, so that's what's protecting them. But it doesn't mean that that defect's not there if you're not hearing it from everybody. But when you start hearing it from multiple people in different buildings, red flags should go up, because that is not normal. And it might be time to bring out an expert. If you've got issues that are really technical, especially those of you who deal with high rises, that can be extremely technical, that might be a time to bring in an expert. Or anything that's structural or retaining walls, those are extremely complicated. You shouldn't go alone with a retaining wall. I will just say that, full stop. If you've got retaining wall issues that are blowing out, that look like they're about to fall, that have slid or just collapsed, absolutely, you're going to need an expert on that. And that is a very specific kind of expert as well. And really, experts can also help communicate with the board, and we like to use them as our go-between between, I'm not an engineer, but I'll let the engineer talk about the engineering and explain to the homeowner, so you can ask them all the specific construction questions that they may have, that will help explain what's going on in layman's terms.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't recall a case where there was, say, 3 window complaints, water intrusion, and it wasn't systemic. And when I say systemic, I mean project-wide. Like Monica mentioned, it's the same building plans, it's the same subcontractors, it's the same building practices, and they're not going to do a few buildings right and then change the way they do things and start building them right. So yeah, 3 is a great number. If you're hearing the same complaints, it's probably a good time to think about bringing in an expert.
And since you guys are really the go-between with your vendors and your board, you guys are in a good position as property managers. Once you think, this might be a little interesting, maybe you know that a certain vendor will at least do a walk for free, you can do that. And once you get some information, you can talk to your board, or vice versa. You can talk to your board first, see if they're open to getting an expert out. Either way, discussion should be happening with your board members to let them know, I've seen enough to know that there might be issues here. Let's just take a look. The only thing it can do is help and provide more information to the association about what's happening with their community and with their investment. So assuming you do have construction issues, how do you resolve them? There's really 4 options, right? You can negotiate it out with the builder. You can go to litigation, which is a lawsuit actually in court. You can arbitrate, which is basically a private version of a lawsuit that you would file in court. You can try to mediate, which is just another way of negotiating, except with a specific person who is designated to be the middleman in between both parties. So you're not doing it face to face. You've got someone in between who's kind of being the referee. And a more unusual, but it does happen, is a plan B type of resolution, where let's say you have retained an expert, the builder has retained their own experts, and maybe we're close, but we're not quite there. That's where you let go and say, let's let the experts get in a room and talk it out, and let them come up with their agreed upon plan of how to go forward and fix this. And we will agree as both parties to go with that plan. You know, if your expert has plan A, their expert has plan B, but together they've Frankenstein one to make a plan C that everyone can agree on. I would say negotiating on your own without an attorney and without experts is extremely ill-advised, because the builder has the knowledge of the construction, and unfortunately a board does not, right? That's just not what they do. It would just be too lopsided on that. Could you do it with experts and without attorneys? Yes. Would it be advisable? No, because oftentimes, even though you may not have an attorney, the builder does. And whether it's their insurance provided attorney or their own personal attorney, they have someone on their side who's going to then hand you over a release and a settlement agreement that says, fine, we worked this out on our own. We're going to do this repair for you. But by the way, sign this document. And the document will say you release any and all claims, past, future. It's going to be an extreme waiver that even if they did the work wrong, or there are other things that their work does not anticipate, which should have been anticipated, you've now released that claim and they don't have to do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably one of the worst courses of action is try to negotiate with the builder directly. These people are very savvy business people. They know the issues. They've been sued many times in most instances, and their one goal is to come in and do some sort of valued engineered scope that covers up the damage. I've seen many cases where, you know, the board tried to negotiate, or the management company tried to negotiate with the developer, and they agreed to come in and try to convince the board that, hey, we can just caulk these cracks, we can put a new paint job on it, and we'll replace these couple windows, and you'll be great. And by the way, we need you to sign this releasing of us of all future claims if we do this. And, you know, I think we've already illustrated that the types of damages that these construction defect problems have, that it's not as simple as that. And you don't want to get put in a position where, you know, in several years down the road, the same stuff starts happening, and now you have no recourse.
Right. Litigation and arbitration, you know, I would never advise anyone to file a lawsuit without an attorney. If I ever needed personally an attorney to represent me, I would not represent myself. Just don't do it. Just don't represent yourself. That's just good legal advice. I don't care what it is, whether it's a traffic ticket or, you know, something else. Get a lawyer, someone who specializes in that area of law. So whether or not you're going to go through the arbitration or the litigation, you're going to want to do it with an attorney. You're not going to want to go it alone, and you are going to want to have experts on both sides, because they will be their own expert and they're going to be their own advocate that's really just trying to do what's best for them, while couching it as being, you know, something that's going to be really helpful for you. Now, I will say I have seen builders who truly do want to do the right thing, and they do the right thing, and they do step up. But the amount of builders who are in that category is far less than the builders who are really just trying to turn a profit, move on, and keep going on to the next one. So this is a big one. We've been talking about it almost in every slide, but time. Time is not on your side. In the state of Texas, there are two timeframes that you really need to know of. One is the statute of repose, and that is a time frame of the life of the building or the community itself. You have 10 years for anything to do with the building itself, the construction of the building itself, from 10 years from the first date of substantial completion. What does that mean? That is somewhat settled, but there are lots of gray areas. So generally, I would say, if your building or your community is less than 10 years old and those latent or concealed defects finally start manifesting themselves before that 10 years, that's when you really should start thinking that you're getting close to this time frame where you cannot pursue anything. And often what happens is that, let's say a community finds an issue maybe in year 8, and they think we want to work it out with the builder ourselves. And the builder knows you're on year 8 too. So they might, they start slow playing it. And the negotiations, the calls, the meetings back and forth, it's slow. It becomes this long drawn out process. And before you know it, you're almost at year 10 and you're just now starting to look for an attorney because the builder just didn't come through. Well, now you're at year 10 of the life of the building. Unfortunately, you may be time barred from ever bringing a claim. The statute of limitations is a different time frame. This one attaches itself to the actual damage itself. So when you realize you've got those roof leaks, window leaks, whatever the case may be, you've got a time frame of 2 years ticking. Unfortunately, when that time starts is extremely hazy. It is a question of fact for the jury to decide. There is no bright line. That's why we're trying to give you guys this lesson of 3. But the legal definition of when that starts is when a reasonable homeowner knew or should have known of defects. It's not the damage. And a lot of people get tripped up because they think, well, I didn't know it was because of the flashing around my windows until we opened the walls. That is not when it starts. You are imputed to have the knowledge when you first saw the window leak. And that could have been a year or 2 before. Maybe your homeowners are not reporting it to you. When it comes to HOAs, the knowledge that the board has can be tricky too, because maybe an old board was aware that there were window leaks, but they didn't want to deal with it. And now you've got a new board who says, hey, I didn't even know anything about this until I joined, 2 years later. Well, unfortunately, in a litigation, they're going to go back and they're going to take all your meeting minutes and they're going to look at all your emails and invoices, and they can easily see, oh, this board knew about this more than 2 years ago, so therefore you're time barred. So you really, as a property manager, again, you guys have the eagle eye to know whether or not this may be an issue that you should be thinking about time-wise. It's not on your side. Never assume that you know exactly when that time starts, because it is just so amorphous and it's malleable. So I would say, if you are hearing about these kinds of issues that seem to be systemic, get someone out there immediately, have someone take a look, and be proactive about it, because you do not want to be, as the property manager, you don't want to be the reason why a board may later say, I was time barred because you, property manager, didn't tell me. And had you told me what you knew, we could have recovered from the builder. So now I'm going to sue you. That's not a place you guys want to be in. So definitely be proactive.
Yeah, well put, Monica. I've been involved with many cases where they missed the statute of limitations. And the example I always use is roofs. And I've had a couple cases where they were doing repairs to the roof. They were calling out vendors. There was email change. There was invoices being paid, up to 3 years back. And essentially the defense argued that they missed the statute of limitations, and they did, and they didn't get a recovery for that item. And if you look at a construction defect from 30,000 feet, your big recoverable items are generally going to be windows, coatings, roofs, and stucco. And in these cases, they missed getting a roof recovery in both instances. So, if you think those 4 things out of 100%, they only got 75% back. And that could have been alleviated if they would have at least consulted with an expert initially and done an inspection, and then, hopefully consulted with an attorney and find out what the next steps are.
So I know we're running out of time. I'm going to go through these next 2 really quickly. Some people will say, well, what about our insurance? Doesn't our insurance cover this? Or what about my homeowner's warranty? Doesn't this cover any issues that I may have with my house? And the answer is more than likely no. Most HOA insurance that you guys would purchase for the association will have exclusions. And this is just a little example from one that we've seen, but it's pretty predominant. I won't say it's in everyone because I've not read them all, but for the most part, if you were to look in your insurance policies, the long one, not just the cover sheet, you're going to see something that's got an exclusion that'll say we will not pay for loss or damage caused by, and then you go down and you'll see faulty, inadequate, or defective designs, specification, workmanship, repair, that just everything, the gamut. We do not cover construction defect. It won't say it that plainly or simply, but it will more than likely be there. And on the next slide, I've got a little example from a very popular homeowner's warranty that a lot of people see or are provided. Maybe they've even paid for. But when you go to the exclusion section, you'll see something that this warranty doesn't provide coverage for: failure of the builder to construct the home in compliance with the original plans and specifications. Elsewhere in this homeowner's warranty, it also says we don't cover the builder's failure for following building codes, regulations, standards, industry standards, manufacturers' specifications. It just lists the gamut of all the ways that a builder should be following what would be a good and workmanlike manner, all the things that follow under that. It's not covered. So unfortunately, a homeowner may say, oh, let me make a claim for that. We often tell people, you should try to exhaust your remedies, but don't hold your breath and don't be disappointed because there are these exclusions in your policies.
So we covered a lot of ground here, and I think we're running short on time, but we talked about bringing in an expert, having a consultation. So we came up with a tool that we like to use. It's called the Preliminary Observation Report. We do these free for the management companies and the homeowners associations. And basically it's a ground level inspection of all your buildings, checking for defects. If we do find them, we highlight them with pictures, and we build this kind of observation report of your entire community. And the goal really here is to find out if you do have a case and what are your options. And at the end of the day, we're just trying to get the information and the options out to the homeowners. Ultimately, the board's going to decide if they want to file a construction defect, but we feel like it's a really good idea if they have all the information and the options before them. We had a pretty in-depth discussion about experts. Obviously, Empire Works is not the only expert out there, just like there's other attorney firms out there. But I think the next few slides actually deal with what kind of person you should be dealing with in terms of experts. We have engineers. Their services are greatly appreciated during the litigation. They're not always the right person to talk to necessarily after the case is settled, but generally speaking, you want to hire an expert that's involved in the destructive testing and putback, that provides expert witness testimony, creates scopes of work for your community. A lot of times the one-off contractors, and this is not a ding on them at all, like the painters or there's a roofer, they could provide perhaps some valuable insight, but you really want to talk to a person that does this day in and day out. Yeah, so here's an example of a production schedule. Some of the other things that experts do is they provide mediation and arbitration support, reconstruction planning, scheduling, cost control, construction services, and project management. I feel like, Carly, that's probably a good place to end. I think the other two slides are just more about what experts are. This is a great slide here. So the team approach, let's talk about that one first. So, when we get into these construction defect claims, you really want to build an expert team. And generally that consists of an expert engineer, the HOA board, the management company, and the attorneys. And that will be your team you work with moving forward to ultimately provide a resolution that works for the community.
Yeah, construction defect doesn't have to be scary. If you have a good team with you, I know we typically lean heavily on our property managers. You guys are invaluable to us, and a good board is, also worth its weight in gold, as you guys know. I'm sure you guys have your own favorites, but a good team can get it done and can get it done quickly. And there are going to be some growing pains, but ultimately it's really just to help the community out and get it in tip-top shape. That's it. So I've seen some things in the chat. I haven't really seen any questions though. Does anyone have any questions?
If anybody has any questions, feel free to enter them in the chat or unmute your mic. Feel free to ask.
It's a lot of information. I think it's soaking in right now.
Everyone's soaking it up.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, has anybody in Houston had to deal with a construction defect that's been on this call, or have you learned any new information?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay.
So I have a question. So there's a division, a townhome division that's being built on the other side of our lake. They actually own the property that comes all the way up to the edge of our lake. And anyway, so they're really building very close to the edge of the lake. And a lot of us homeowners are like, we're not in one homeowner association. They're actually a completely separate homeowner association. So several of us homeowners are looking at these townhomes that are like right on the edge of the lake, thinking, oh my goodness, they're so close to the edge of the lake. Certainly they're going to end up going in the lake maybe a few years from now, or maybe many years from now, who knows? But I'm just curious. I mean, because we kind of don't trust that developer over there either. And so I'm just curious, is this something that you guys would look at for us and just be able to determine whether or not, we would have some kind of a case on that or what? So that's my question.
Unfortunately, so the people who would have the claim should their house fall into the lake would be that homeowners association, not you guys. So it's hard to say that. Could we look at it? Yes. Would it be for you? Probably not, because you wouldn't have standing to bring the claim, right? Because it's not your property that was damaged. It's theirs. I think it would be extremely good move for whoever that homeowners association is to have someone come back, probably while the builder's still there, to get it done with the builder. Something like that is going to require some intense civil engineering and geotechnical engineering to know exactly what those soils are doing and how to properly pier them or design them in such a way that they've already accounted for earthquakes, floods, things like that will prevent those houses from falling into the lake.
It's actually still under development, and they actually, the one thing that developer agreed to is to pay for part of our lake maintenance and things, some of the lake water and the lake maintenance, but hasn't paid us a dime yet. And it's been going on for over a year now. So, yeah.
You guys should definitely want to reach out to the developer on that for that part.
Which we're doing, and it's not helping at all. But anyway, we're still working on it. But I just thought maybe if we could even like look at that side of, his development. But,
I see.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
I do see some questions coming in now. Let's see, I'll start with Norma. Do you come down to the Rio Grande Valley? Norma, I'm actually from Harlingen, Texas myself. I'm from the Rio Grande Valley. I would absolutely come down to the valley. I could stay home for a little bit and visit with my folks. Our firm has not yet had a case in the valley, but I'm definitely pushing for it, and I would not be opposed at all to doing a sidewalk down there.
Same for us. I still love this comment. They don't do stucco install correctly, period. That's awesome. You're 100% right. The techniques to repair get mixed up in the process. Caulk is temporary, absolutely. And generally speaking, when the developers and builders come back to make repairs, because you negotiated something under their warranty and they want you to get a signed release from you, generally that's what they do. They caulk and they paint. And they do nothing to the mold and the water intrusion and the dry rot in the framing and sheeting. Let's see, we got the ones who orchestrated the bad work does not need to.
Do not need to determine what a third-party inspection should do.
I think I understand the nature of this question. So if I'm understanding this correctly, what you're saying is the person that did the bad work should not be able to determine the third-party inspection or what that inspection entails. And if that's the case, you're absolutely right. We discussed that if we do, during the course of an inspection, if we do find defects and we consult with the board and they want to move forward with their claim, there's absolutely a process for the builder to come back and fix it right. Generally, they walk away and don't want to mess with the repairs. I think Monica has a couple situations where they did come back and do it right. But yeah, they have no say as long as from my perspective, as long as the community has now transitioned to a board made up of the community members, the builder has no say on who does the inspection, what that inspection entails, and who does the inspection.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah Block says, our gated community has clearance bars that got damaged. We had some repair bids, mostly around the $2,000 pricing. Then one was a bigger job with the $22,000 pricing. We began to wonder if we needed an expert/engineer to determine actual need, if not just a repair, but a full replacement. I think that's a better question for Paul.
Yeah, I don't know if how was the damage caused? Did a car run into it? Was it something that was, defective when it was installed? I can't count the amount of times that I've been called out for minor details, just to hey, we have one small window or we have rust on our community fence, and they allowed us to do a community-wide inspection, and we found all kinds of stuff. So in those cases, I'm probably never going to tell a board I won't come out and take a look, just because there may be much bigger issues. This 22K repair could actually turn into several $1 million construction defect. So again, I would be willing to take a look at this, just with the knowledge that we probably do a more thorough inspection and consult with you on what we found and potentially the board.
Thank you.
Wendy asks, has anyone had to deal with a big bulkhead repair project due to the builder not installing it correctly initially? So I can't say I've done that kind of case yet, but it wouldn't shock me. But those kinds of things happen all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got crooked developers, substandard construction, water intrusion, no builder's insurance found. Can be a problem. We have it. Luckily, us. Yeah, these construction defect claims can take all kinds of turns. At the end of the day, we're trying to get money from the subcontractors' insurance policies, and sometimes that can be challenging. We've had cases where they've gone out of business, and there's no insurance there. We always have the option of waiting it out with the developer, and probably Monica is much more qualified to speak on that in terms of insurance policies. But you got to remember, at the end of the day, these are big, some are Fortune 500 companies. They're savvy business people. They completely understand that they're not paying enough to these subcontractors to do it right. And they roll the dice and they keep billing them because they're making money. And then if you look at a defect case, we sue the subcontractors. A lot of times the builder, he assigns his rights and he may have to put in very little. So it's actually the subcontractors that foot the bill. So here you have a guy that's building stuff substandard and knows it. He knows there's defects, has to put in very little, and it inconveniences the homeowners who just made the biggest investment of their life. And now you're pushing the subcontractors out of business who aren't getting paid enough money to do it right. It's a racket.
Yeah, and in those kinds of cases, Parker, who I think is my machine gun toting Santa Claus, in those kinds of cases, we have gone where we have been in a position, and we currently are in a position in one case where a builder has assigned their rights to us. And now we are pursuing the subcontractors as if we were the builder. And it's a different position to be in, but if it's the only position you can be in, you know, what that can add to your pot, right? Either the association is paying 100%, even if you can get that down to 85% or 70% that have been subsidized by, you know, at least one or two or three subs, that helps you guys in your bottom line for what needs to be specially assessed.
That's absolutely right, Monica. I mean, if there's a lack of insurance or there's some other challenge barring from getting enough money to make you whole again, the silver lining with the defect is you're going to get something, right? And it's probably substantial. It's going to be a whole lot more than what you had to begin with. If you're faced with, say, a $3 million repair bill and you missed the statute or you didn't, you know, pursue litigation, you're going to have to come up with that $3 million somehow. And even if the attorneys are like, they have challenges with getting money from the insurance policy, say they get you two, well, now you have $2 million more than you didn't have before. And that's a big head start on making those repairs.
Hey everyone, so sorry for running over. We should probably, if you have more questions, reach out to Paul or Monica. But hey, Zeus, I think we need to give away.
Yes,
some
let's all good questions. Thank you everyone for sticking around, and thank you Paul and Monica for you know, your support, the chapter and putting this together. A lot of work goes into the back end of this, and so I think it was reflected in today's presentation.